The boarding pass fell from my husband's laptop like a confession written in digital ink. Cabo San Lucas, first class the exact same week. David had supposedly been suffering through mind-numbing business seminars in Las Vegas. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was realizing that the $2 million he wanted me to invest in his latest business opportunity was actually my own money he'd been planning to steal. My name is Elena Nakamura, CEO of a successful tech company, and I thought I was living the American dream. For 4 years, I'd been the supportive wife to David Sterling, a charming real estate consultant. I celebrated his victories, comforted him through struggles, and never questioned his frequent business trips. When I discovered that boarding pass, I thought I was dealing with a cheating husband. I had no idea I was about to uncover a sophisticated criminal network called the Phoenix Group that had been systematically targeting successful women across the West Coast, stealing millions while hiding behind fake businesses and romantic relationships. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens when predators underestimate the intelligence and determination of the women they target. It's about the moment when victims transform into hunters and when justice is served with surgical precision. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What started as one woman's discovery of her husband's lies became a coordinated takedown of an entire criminal empire. And the methods we use to destroy them? Well, let's just say that David Sterling and his Phoenix Group never saw us coming. The woman who found that boarding pass thought she knew what betrayal looked like. She had no idea how wrong she was, and she definitely didn't know that her response would change everything. The notification chimed softly on my laptop at 2:47 a.m., pulling me from the quarterly budget spreadsheets that had been consuming my evening. Another automated backup completion from David's old MacBook, the one he'd retired 6 months ago, after claiming a coffee spill had damaged the keyboard beyond repair. I'd been meaning to wipe it clean and donate it to our company's tech literacy program, but like so many tasks in my overscheduled life, it had languished in our home office closet. Elena Nakamura, they called me in Forbes last year. The UX visionary who humanized technology. 32 years old CEO of Meridian Design, the Seattle-based user experience firm I'd built from a Stanford dorm room idea into a company employing 63 people and serving clients from Netflix to Nike. The daughter of a Toyota assembly line supervisor and a high school art teacher who'd somehow managed to create something my immigrant grandparents could never have imagined possible in America. But at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, I wasn't thinking about success stories or immigrant dreams. I was thinking about how David's old laptop was still syncing to his cloud storage, and how the boarding pass that had just downloaded definitely wasn't for the Las Vegas Business Development Conference he'd claimed to attend 3 weeks ago. Cabo San Lucas, first class, October 3rd through October 7th. The same dates David had supposedly been suffering through mind-numbing seminars and overpriced hotel coffee at the Henderson Convention Center. The same week he'd called me twice, complaining about the dry heat and boring presentations, his voice carrying that slightly strained quality it got when he was genuinely miserable. I stared at the PDF until the blue light from my monitor began to burn my eyes. There had to be an explanation. A mistake in the cloud sync, maybe. Old travel documents from a previous trip I'd forgotten about. David Sterling, my husband of 4 years, successful real estate investment consultant. The man who still brought me coffee in bed every Sunday morning wouldn't lie about something so elaborate and specific, except the timestamp on the file showed it had been created 3 weeks and 2 days ago. Downloaded to his phone exactly 4 hours before he'd called me from Las Vegas to complain about his terrible hotel room and the conference's vegetarian lunch options. My hands moved without conscious direction, opening David's cloud storage folder. Password protected, but I knew his patterns. David's 1989, his name and birth year, the same combination he used for everything, despite my gentle teasing about password security. The folder opened immediately, revealing a digital archaeology of our marriage that I'd never thought to explore. 4 years of files organized with the meticulous attention to detail that had first attracted me to David. Travel confirmations, hotel reservations, restaurant receipts, all the documentation of a life I thought I knew intimately. But the dates were wrong. Everything was wrong. The business dinner in Portland last month had actually been a weekend at the Napa Valley Wine Train with someone named Madison Torres. I found photos David's arm around a stunning brunette woman I'd never seen before, both of them laughing at some private joke, both wearing matching gold bracelets from Tiffany & Company. The client emergency that had kept him in San Francisco for 4 days in August turned out to be a romantic getaway to Big Sur with a different woman. Sophia Chen, according to the hotel registration. A successful marketing executive based on the LinkedIn profile that came up when I searched her name. Beautiful in that effortless way that made my own professionally crafted appearance feel suddenly artificial. Madison Torres in Portland, Sophia Chen in San Francisco. 2 women, 2 cities, 2 complete lies told with the same casual conviction David used to discuss quarterly investment projections or weekend dinner plans. I pushed back from my desk so hard that my ergonomic chair rolled across the hardwood floor and bumped against the window overlooking Elliott Bay. The Seattle skyline glittered below, familiar and comforting, but nothing felt familiar anymore. The home office where I'd built my company, where David and I had planned our future, where he'd proposed 3 years ago with a speech about building something lasting together. It all felt like a stage set for a play I'd unknowingly been performing in for years. My phone buzzed. A text from David sent from whatever hotel room he was actually occupying tonight. "Missing you, beautiful. This Phoenix conference is brutal, but the deals look promising. Home Thursday evening. Love you." Phoenix, not Las Vegas, not the Henderson Convention Center with its mind-numbing seminars and overpriced coffee. Phoenix, where he was probably sharing another hotel room with another woman whose existence I'd never suspected. I found the reservation confirmation 20 minutes later, buried in a subfolder labeled Personal Travel. The Four Seasons, Scottsdale. Presidential suite, 2 guests. Checkout scheduled for Thursday morning, exactly when David planned to return home to Seattle and kiss me hello like the devoted husband he'd never actually been. The Four Seasons Scottsdale charges $3,000 per night for their presidential suite. David's supposed real estate consulting business had been struggling lately, at least according to him. He'd been stressed about cash flow, apologetic about not contributing as much to our joint accounts, grateful for my understanding about his temporary financial constraints. But someone was paying for presidential suites and first-class flights and romantic getaways that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Someone was funding David's elaborate double life, and the arithmetic was starting to paint a picture I didn't want to acknowledge. I opened our joint bank account online. David had access to everything, of course. We'd combined our finances completely after marriage, believing in transparency and shared goals. The account showed our standard automatic deposits, my salary from Meridian Design, the quarterly dividends from my stock portfolio, the rental income from the Bellevue property I'd inherited from my grandmother. But there were withdrawals I didn't recognize, cash advances that David had somehow processed without my knowledge, wire transfers to accounts I'd never heard of. Over the past 6 months, nearly $180,000 had disappeared from our joint savings. Money that should have been building toward the house we'd planned to buy in Magnolia, the children we'd discussed having next year, the secure future we'd supposedly been creating together. David had been stealing from me to fund his relationships with other women. Not just cheating, robbing me of my own money to pay for elaborate deceptions that had reduced my marriage to a convenient cover story and reliable funding source. I sat in my dark office until dawn, scrolling through years of evidence that my husband was someone I'd never actually met. The David Sterling who brought me coffee on Sunday mornings was a performance. The man who'd held my hand through my father's cancer treatment last year was an actor playing a role. The husband who'd listened to my dreams about expanding Meridian Design internationally while offering supportive advice had been calculating how much longer he could maintain his deception before moving on to his next victim. Because that's what I was, I realized, as the sun began to rise over Elliott Bay. A victim, a mark, someone to be exploited and discarded once the resources were exhausted or the risk of discovery became too high. My phone rang at 7:15 a.m. David's name appeared on the screen, probably calling with another fiction about breakfast meetings and difficult clients. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message with the detached curiosity of an anthropologist studying a previously unknown species. Hey, gorgeous. I know you're probably getting ready for your board meeting today. Just wanted to hear your voice before I dive into these final presentations. The Phoenix Group is really interested in our West Coast expansion plans, so I might need to extend the trip by a day. I'll call you tonight with details. Love you more than you know. Love you more than you know. The phrase that had once made my heart flutter now sounded like mockery. He was right, in a way. I hadn't known the extent of his deception until a few hours ago, but I was learning fast. I made coffee using the expensive Italian machine David had given me for our anniversary, probably purchased with money stolen from our joint account, and began to think strategically. The woman who'd built Meridian Design from nothing understood the importance of information gathering before making critical decisions. The immigrant granddaughter who'd learned to read people's motivations and hidden agendas in corporate boardrooms knew that emotions, however justified, were a luxury I couldn't afford right now. David thought he was dealing with a naive wife who trusted completely and questioned nothing. He'd underestimated the analytical mind that had turned a college UX design project into a multi-million-dollar company. That mistake was going to cost him everything. I opened a new private browser window and began researching Madison Torres and Sophia Chen. Not to stalk them or blame them, they were victims too deceived as thoroughly as I'd been, but to understand the scope of David's operation and the sophistication of his methods. Madison Torres owned a successful marketing consultancy in Portland. Stanford MBA, impressive client roster, frequent speaker at industry conferences. She'd been posting photos from her wonderful weekend in Napa with her amazing boyfriend David just 3 weeks ago. The posts were happy, genuine, completely unaware that the man she was falling in love with was married to someone else. Sophia Chen was even more accomplished. Senior VP at a major San Francisco advertising firm, featured on the cover of Adweek last year, board member of 2 nonprofit organizations. Her Instagram showed photos from Big Sur with a man she tagged as my brilliant partner David, the same man who'd been lying next to me in our Seattle bedroom the night before that trip, discussing our plans for remodeling the kitchen. Both women were successful, financially independent, professionally accomplished. David wasn't targeting random victims, he was specifically choosing women who could provide both emotional validation and financial resources. Women like me. I started a spreadsheet because that's what you do when you're a CEO dealing with a crisis. Dates, locations, financial transactions, inconsistencies in David's stories. The data revealed patterns that were both sophisticated and deeply disturbing. David maintained completely separate personas for each relationship. With me, he was the real estate consultant building long-term wealth through property investments. With Madison, he was apparently a venture capital advisor helping tech startups navigate West Coast markets. With Sophia, he presented himself as a business development executive specializing in entertainment industry partnerships. Each identity was carefully crafted to appeal to his target's professional interests and personal values. Each woman believed she was dating someone whose career complemented her own, whose lifestyle matched her aspirations, whose values aligned with her worldview. The psychological manipulation required to maintain such elaborate deceptions suggested someone with either extensive training or significant natural talent for exploitation. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Board meeting at Meridian Design in 2 hours. Quarterly review with investors. Strategic planning for next year's expansion discussions about the IPO timeline we'd been considering. A day that would normally require my complete attention and energy. But I couldn't focus on market projections and growth strategies while my personal life was disintegrating. I needed time to process, to investigate, to plan my response to David's betrayal. More importantly, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before making any decisions about how to proceed. I called my assistant and rescheduled the board meeting, claiming a family emergency. It wasn't entirely a lie. The family I thought I had was certainly experiencing an emergency, even if I was the only one who knew it yet. Then I did something I'd never done in 4 years of marriage. I hired a private investigator. Marcus Webb had been recommended by Patricia Chen, my corporate attorney, as someone who specialized in financial fraud and domestic deception. His office was in Pioneer Square, occupying the top floor of a restored brick building that managed to feel both professional and discreet. Webb himself was nothing like the grizzled detective stereotypes from movies. Mid-40s, well-dressed, with the kind of calm competence that suggested extensive experience with situations like mine. He listened to my story without judgment, taking notes on a legal pad while I explained about the boarding passes and the missing money and the women whose existence I discovered at 2:47 a.m. "How long has your husband been traveling frequently for business?" he asked when I finished. "About 2 years. It started gradually, maybe 1 trip per month, but it's been increasing. Now he's gone at least twice a month, sometimes more." "And the financial discrepancies you discovered, do they correlate with the travel timeline?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the spreadsheet I'd been building. Perfectly. Every major withdrawal corresponds to one of his trips, and the amounts are significant, often more than most people make in a month. Webb studied the data with the focused attention of someone who'd seen similar patterns before. "Mrs. Sterling, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before answering. Has your husband ever asked you to sign financial documents without fully explaining their purpose? Loan applications, investment agreements, anything that might have given him access to additional resources beyond your joint accounts?" The question hit me like ice water. "Last month," I said slowly. "He asked me to co-sign a business loan application for his consulting firm. Said it was routine paperwork for a line of credit that would help with cash flow during expansion." "Did you read the application thoroughly?" I felt sick. I skimmed it. David explained it was standard language and I trusted his judgment about his own business needs. Webb made another note. "We'll need to obtain copies of any documents you've signed recently. If your husband is running the kind of operation your evidence suggests, he may have used your signature and financial credentials for purposes beyond simple joint account access." The possibility hadn't occurred to me, but it made horrible sense. David had access to my financial information, my business credentials, my professional reputation. If he'd been willing to steal money from our joint accounts, why wouldn't he leverage my success in other ways? "There's something else," Webb continued. "The level of sophistication you're describing, multiple identities, carefully planned financial exploitation, systematic targeting of successful women, this doesn't sound like an individual operation. Professional romance fraud often involves networks of collaborators who share resources, techniques, and sometimes even victims." Networks of collaborators. The phrase sent chills down my spine. "You're saying David might not be working alone. I'm saying we need to investigate that possibility. If your husband is part of an organized fraud operation, then understanding the scope of that operation becomes crucial for both your legal protection and your personal safety." I signed Webb's retainer agreement and authorized him to begin a comprehensive investigation into David's activities, financial records, travel patterns, communication histories, professional associations, everything that might reveal the true scope of his deception. Walking back to my car in Pioneer Square, I felt like someone waking up from a long, pleasant dream into a reality that was far more complex and dangerous than anything I'd imagined. The woman who'd entered Webb's office had been the betrayed wife of a cheating husband. The woman leaving was potentially the target of a sophisticated criminal operation. My phone rang as I reached my Tesla. David again, probably with another update about his fictional Phoenix conference. This time I answered, curious to hear how he'd elaborate on his current deception. "Elena, perfect timing. I just got out of the most promising presentation yet. The Phoenix Development Group wants to fast-track 3 of our West Coast projects." His voice carried the enthusiasm that had always been one of his most attractive qualities. Even knowing it was completely fabricated, I could feel the pull of his charm, the way he made everything sound exciting and possible. "That's wonderful," I said, my own voice steady despite the rage building beneath the surface. "Tell me about the projects." For the next 10 minutes, David spun an elaborate fiction about resort developments and commercial real estate opportunities. He spoke with the fluency of someone who'd either researched extensively or had significant practice lying about such things. Every detail was plausible, every financial projection reasonable, every timeline realistic. The performance was masterful. If I hadn't discovered his cloud storage files, I would have believed every word. I would have celebrated his success, maybe even suggested a dinner reservation to commemorate the deal when he returned home. "Elena," David's voice carried a note of concern. "You're being unusually quiet. Everything okay?" "Just tired," I said. "Long day at the office. Board meeting got complicated." "Want to talk about it? I've got time before my dinner meeting." Another lie. Another fabrication designed to maintain his fiction while managing my expectations about his availability. I wondered who he was really planning to have dinner with, and whether she knew about his wife in Seattle or his girlfriend in Portland. "No, it's fine. Business stuff. Nothing that can't wait until you're home." "Okay, but Elena, I love you. Whatever's going on at work, we'll figure it out together when I get back. That's what partners do." Partners. The word felt like mockery. David had never been my partner. He'd been my parasite feeding off my success while constructing elaborate lies to cover his exploitation. "I love you too." I said the words automatic after 4 years of marriage, but they felt different now, like a foreign language I was speaking phonetically without understanding the meaning. After hanging up, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching people walk through Pioneer Square with their normal problems and ordinary lives. Couples holding hands, parents pushing strollers, business people talking on phones about legitimate deals and actual conferences. I envied them their uncomplicated realities. The simplicity of trusting that the people they loved were who they claimed to be, that the marriages they'd built were based on honesty rather than elaborate performance art. But envy was another luxury I couldn't afford. I had work to do. I drove home to our Belltown condo, the place where David and I had planned our future together, where we'd made love and fought and reconciled and dreamed about children and growing old together. Everything looked the same. The furniture we'd chosen together, the artwork I'd collected, the kitchen where David made his famous Sunday morning pancakes. But it all felt contaminated now, like evidence in a crime scene I was just beginning to understand. I spent the evening going through David's remaining possessions with new eyes. The expensive watch he'd claimed was a gift from a grateful client. The custom suits that seemed beyond the budget of a struggling real estate consultant. The various credit cards and bank statements that arrived in his name, but which he always handled privately. In his bedside drawer, underneath insurance documents and old passport photos, I found business cards for companies I'd never heard of. Sterling Ventures, Phoenix Development Group, West Coast Investment Solutions. 3 different businesses, 3 different professional identities, all bearing David's name and contact information. My husband wasn't just a cheater, using stolen money to fund his affairs. He was running multiple fraudulent businesses, using my financial credentials and professional reputation to establish credibility with victims across the West Coast. The scope of his deception was larger than anything I'd imagined when I first saw that boarding pass to Cabo San Lucas. This wasn't about romance or even theft. It was about a systematic criminal enterprise that had been using my marriage as cover for operations I was only beginning to understand. I called Marcus Webb at his emergency number. "Elena," his voice was alert despite the late hour. "What did you find?" "More than we discussed, much more. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? I think we need to involve law enforcement." There was a pause. "What kind of law enforcement?" "The kind that investigates organized financial fraud. Because I don't think my husband is just stealing from me. I think he's been stealing from everyone." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The FBI field office in downtown Seattle occupied 12 floors of a glass tower that reflected the morning sky like a mirror designed to hide secrets. Agent Sarah Rodriguez met us in a conference room on the 8th floor, her expression professionally neutral, as Marcus Webb and I spread 4 years' worth of evidence across the polished table. Rodriguez was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of focused intensity that suggested extensive experience with cases involving financial deception. She'd specialized in romance fraud for 6 years, according to Webb, and had seen enough elaborate schemes to recognize sophisticated operations when they surfaced. "The pattern you're describing isn't uncommon," Rodriguez said, after reviewing my spreadsheets and David's forged business cards. "But the scale is significant. Most romance fraud involves individual operators targeting 1 or 2 victims at a time. What you've documented suggests something more organized." She pulled out a tablet and showed us a map of the western United States marked with dozens of red pins. "We've been tracking reports of similar schemes from Portland to San Diego, always targeting successful women, always involving fake investment opportunities, always using legitimate business credentials as cover. The red pins clustered around major metropolitan areas: Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, Phoenix. Each pin represented a woman who'd been targeted by someone using tactics identical to David's methods." "How many victims are we talking about?" I asked. "Confirmed 43 women over the past 3 years, but we suspect the actual number is much higher. Most victims don't report romance fraud because of embarrassment or because they don't realize the scope of what they've experienced." 43 women. The number hit me like a physical blow. I'd thought David's deception was personal, a betrayal specific to our marriage, but apparently I was just the latest mark in an assembly line of exploitation that stretched across multiple states and involved dozens of victims. "The financial losses are staggering," Rodriguez continued. "Confirmed theft totaling over $4.7 million, and that's only what we can document. The real number is probably double that. $4.7 million. Stolen from women who'd trusted men they thought they loved, women who'd been targeted specifically because of their success and independence. The mathematics of the operation were breathtaking in their scope and chilling in their implications." "Agent Rodriguez," I said, "what exactly are we dealing with? Is this just a collection of individual criminals or something more organized?" She exchanged glances with Webb, and I got the sense they'd discussed this question before my arrival. "We believe it's a coordinated network, multiple operators sharing resources, techniques, and possibly victim information. They call themselves the Phoenix Group." The Phoenix Group. The name David had mentioned in his fabricated business calls, the fictional entity I'd assumed was just another layer of his professional deception. But apparently it was real, and my husband was a member. Rodriguez opened a file folder and spread out surveillance photos across the table. Men in expensive suits meeting in upscale restaurants and hotel bars, shaking hands and exchanging documents like legitimate business people conducting normal transactions. I recognized David immediately in the third photograph, seated at what appeared to be a business dinner with 2 other men I'd never seen before. The timestamp showed the photo had been taken 6 weeks ago during a trip when he'd supposedly been visiting potential investment properties in Portland. "How long have you been watching them?" I asked. 8 months. But they're careful. They use encrypted communications, meet in different locations each time, and maintain legitimate-seeming business fronts that make surveillance difficult. She showed us more photos, the same group of men at various locations across the West Coast. Golf courses, conference rooms, private dining rooms. Always well-dressed, always appearing successful, always looking like exactly the kind of businessmen women like me would find attractive and trustworthy. "The sophistication of their operation is remarkable," Rodriguez continued. "They don't just steal money, they create comprehensive fictional identities backed by real business infrastructure. Websites, office addresses, professional references. Everything designed to pass scrutiny from intelligent, successful women who aren't easy to deceive." "But how do they target victims initially?" I asked. "How did David find me?" Webb answered that question. "We've been analyzing the pattern. They attend professional conferences, networking events, charity functions anywhere successful women gather. They research potential targets extensively before making contact, learning about their careers, their interests, their personal situations. The methodology was predatory in its precision. These weren't crimes of opportunity. They were calculated hunting expeditions designed to identify and exploit specific vulnerabilities in accomplished women. "Elena," Rodriguez said gently, "we need your help. You're married to one of their key operators, which gives you access we've never had before. If you're willing to work with us, we could potentially gather evidence that would allow us to arrest the entire network." The request hung in the air like a challenge. Rodriguez was asking me to become an active participant in investigating my own husband, to risk my personal safety for the chance to prevent other women from experiencing what I'd gone through. "What would that involve?" I asked. "Wearing recording devices during conversations with David, documenting his activities when he returns from trips, possibly even attending events where other network members might be present." The risks were obvious. If David discovered my cooperation with law enforcement, I had no idea how he might react. But the alternative, allowing him to continue targeting women like Madison Torres and Sophia Chen, was unacceptable. "I'll do it," I said. "Whatever you need." Rodriguez smiled for the first time since we'd met. "Before we proceed, there's something else you should know. We've been in contact with some of David's other victims. Madison Torres and Sophia Chen have both agreed to cooperate with our investigation." Madison and Sophia. The women whose romantic photos with my husband had shattered my marriage were now potential allies in bringing him to justice. The irony was both painful and empowering. "Can I meet them?" I asked. "Actually," Rodriguez said, "we were hoping you'd suggest that." The coffee shop in Pike Place Market buzzed with its usual morning energy when I arrived to meet Madison Torres and Sophia Chen. I'd chosen a public location because private meetings still felt too intimate, too charged with emotional complexity for my current state of mind. Madison arrived first, and I recognized her immediately from the Instagram photos I'd studied like evidence exhibits. She was even more beautiful in person, with the kind of natural confidence that came from professional success and personal achievement. But her expression carried the same shell-shocked vulnerability I'd been seeing in my own mirror for the past week. "Elena," she asked, approaching my corner table with obvious nervousness. "Yes, thank you for coming." We shook hands with the awkward formality of strangers bound by shared trauma. Madison ordered coffee while we waited for Sophia, both of us struggling with conversation that felt simultaneously too personal and too impersonal for the circumstances. Sophia Chen arrived 10 minutes later, equally beautiful and equally devastated by the discovery of David's deception. She'd driven up from San Francisco specifically for this meeting, taking time off from her senior executive position to participate in what she called the strangest business meeting of my career. "I keep thinking this is some kind of nightmare," Sophia said once we'd settled around the small table. "That I'll wake up and David will be the man I thought he was, and none of this will be real." "I know exactly what you mean," Madison replied. "The worst part isn't the money he stole. It's the way he made me feel so special, so understood. Everything felt so genuine." I found myself nodding in recognition. He told me I was the most remarkable woman he'd ever met, that our connection was something he'd never experienced before. "He said the same thing to me," Sophia said quietly, almost word for word. We sat in silence for a moment, processing the realization that David's most intimate declarations had been scripted performances repeated across multiple relationships. The psychological manipulation was perhaps more devastating than the financial theft. "Agent Rodriguez told me about the Phoenix Group," I said eventually. "How long do you think they've been operating?" Madison pulled out her phone and showed us a series of screenshots. "I've been researching since the FBI contacted me. I found news articles about similar scams going back 5 years, always targeting professional women, always involving fake investment opportunities." The articles painted a disturbing picture of systematic exploitation across the West Coast. Women losing their savings, their businesses, sometimes their careers after being targeted by sophisticated romance fraud schemes. Many of the reported details matched our experiences with David exactly. "There's something else," Sophia said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I think I might have met other members of their group." Madison and I stared at her. "What do you mean?" David took me to a charity gala in San Francisco last month. He introduced me to several of his business partners, charming, successful men who seemed very interested in meeting me. At the time, I thought they were just being friendly. But now you think they were evaluating you as a potential target. I finished. Exactly. One of them, Marcus something, asked very specific questions about my company's financial situation. Another one wanted to know about my investment portfolio. At the time, it seemed like normal conversation among business professionals. The implications were chilling. The Phoenix Group wasn't just operating individual schemes, they were sharing potential victims, possibly even coordinating their targeting to maximize financial extraction from each woman. We need to document everything. I said, my business instincts kicking in. Every interaction, every introduction, every detail we can remember. If they're operating as an organized network, then we need to approach this investigation like we're dismantling a criminal enterprise. Madison and Sophia both nodded, and I realized that despite the horrible circumstances I was looking at, two remarkably capable allies. These weren't passive victims, they were accomplished women with skills and resources that could be powerful weapons against the men who'd targeted us. I have an idea, Madison said. What if we don't just cooperate with the FBI investigation? What if we conduct our own parallel investigation? What do you mean? I mean using our professional networks, our technical skills, our business connections to gather intelligence about the Phoenix Group. We know how they operate because we've all experienced their methods. We can anticipate their moves in ways law enforcement might not. The suggestion was both appealing and terrifying. Taking active control of the investigation would provide a sense of agency that pure cooperation with federal authorities couldn't match. But it would also increase our risk and complicate an already complex situation. What did you have in mind? Sophia asked. Madison pulled out a notebook and began sketching what looked like an organizational chart. David introduced both of you to other members of the group, right? What if we map out those connections? Research the men you met, try to understand the full scope of their network. And then what? I asked. Then we infiltrate them. We use our knowledge of their methods to turn the tables. Instead of being their victims, we become their hunters. The audacity of the plan was breathtaking. Madison was suggesting that we transform ourselves from targets into predators using the very techniques that had been used against us to expose and destroy the network that had betrayed us. That's incredibly dangerous, I said. So is doing nothing while they continue targeting other women, Sophia replied. How many more victims will there be if we just wait for the FBI investigation to work its way through the courts? She was right, and we all knew it. Criminal investigations moved slowly, especially complex financial fraud cases involving multiple jurisdictions. Meanwhile, the Phoenix Group would continue operating, continue targeting successful women, continue stealing money and destroying lives. If we're going to do this, I said slowly, we need to be smart about it. Professional, strategic. Like a business venture, Madison said with a small smile. The three of us forming a company to compete against the Phoenix Group. Except our product is justice, Sophia added. We spent the next 2 hours planning what we began calling Operation Phoenix Down. The name felt appropriate. We were going to bring down the organization that had taken its name from the mythical bird that rose from ashes. But in this case, we would be the ones rising, and they would be the ones reduced to ashes. Madison would use her marketing expertise to research the online presence of suspected Phoenix Group members. Sophia would leverage her advertising industry connections to identify other potential victims and gather intelligence about the group's activities in the Bay Area. I would coordinate with Agent Rodriguez while using my Seattle business network to trace David's local connections. We established secure communication protocols, created shared digital workspaces, and set up regular meeting schedules. Within hours, we'd transformed from 3 isolated victims into a coordinated investigation team with specific roles and clear objectives. There's one more thing, I said as we prepared to leave Pike Place Market. David is supposed to return from Phoenix tomorrow evening. Agent Rodriguez wants me to wear a recording device during our reunion conversation. What will you say to him? Madison asked. I'm going to act like nothing has changed, like I still believe his stories about business conferences and investment opportunities. The FBI thinks he might reveal information about upcoming Phoenix Group activities if he feels completely safe. The plan required me to perform the role of the naive, trusting wife one final time. To kiss my husband hello while knowing he'd spent the week with another woman to listen to his stories about fictional business success while documenting his lies for federal prosecutors. "Can you handle that psychologically?" Sophia asked with genuine concern. "I have to, because every piece of evidence we gather brings us closer to stopping them from hurting other women." That evening, I prepared for David's return like a general preparing for battle. Agent Rodriguez and her technical team had equipped me with recording devices so sophisticated they were virtually undetectable. My wedding ring now contained a microphone. My watch could capture video. Even my favorite earrings had been modified to record conversations. I rehearsed my performance, practicing the expressions of interest and support that had once been genuine but would now be completely calculated. The loving wife, eager to hear about her husband's business success. The supportive partner, ready to celebrate his achievements and comfort his disappointments. David's flight landed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport at 6:47 p.m. I tracked his progress through the airport using the location sharing we'd set up years ago when I worried about his travel safety. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using technology designed to provide comfort and connection to spy on someone who'd been systematically betraying me for years. He arrived home with the energy and enthusiasm that always followed his successful business trips. Yes, designer luggage, expensive cologne, that particular confidence that came from days of being adored by women who believed his lies. Elena. He lifted me off my feet in a bear hug that would have felt wonderful a week ago, and now felt like being embraced by a stranger wearing my husband's face. "God, I missed you. I missed you too." I said the words coming automatically while my modified wedding ring recorded every sound. The Phoenix meetings were incredible, better than I'd hoped. I think we're looking at the biggest expansion opportunity in the company's history. David launched into an elaborate description of fictional business deals, his voice carrying the enthusiasm of someone who'd either convinced himself his lies were true or was simply an exceptionally talented performer. He spoke about investment opportunities and development projects with the fluency of someone who'd researched extensively or had significant practice creating believable business fictions. I listened with apparent fascination while mentally cataloging every lie for Agent Rodriguez's case file. David's performance was masterful, specific enough to seem credible, vague enough to avoid verification, emotional enough to feel genuine. "There's something else," he said, his voice dropping to the intimate tone he used for important announcements. "The Phoenix Group wants to meet with you." The words hit me like electricity. "Meet with me, why?" They're interested in potentially partnering with Meridian Design on some West Coast development projects. Hotel chains need UX consultation for their digital interfaces, and your reputation in the industry is exactly what they're looking for. David was proposing to introduce me directly to the Phoenix Group. The criminal network I'd been investigating wanted to meet with me professionally, apparently unaware that their own member's wife was working with federal authorities to destroy them. "That sounds amazing," I said, hoping my voice conveyed excitement rather than the terror I actually felt. Next week. They're hosting a networking event in Portland. High-end stuff, potential investors, development partners, the kind of people who could take Meridian Design to the next level. A networking event in Portland, where Madison Torres lived and worked, where she'd been targeted by David and possibly other Phoenix Group members, where the Phoenix Group apparently felt comfortable operating in plain sight, confident that their victims would never recognize them or understand the scope of their criminal enterprise. "I'd love to meet them," I said, already planning how to coordinate with Agent Rodriguez and the rest of our investigation team. David smiled with genuine pleasure, apparently delighted by my enthusiasm for what he thought was a business opportunity, and what I now understood was my chance to gather intelligence about the entire criminal network. "Perfect. I'll set everything up. Elena, this could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for, the chance to really build something significant together." Together. The word felt like mockery, but also like prophecy. David and I would indeed be building something together next week, but it would be the evidence file that destroyed the Phoenix Group forever. That night, I lay awake next to my husband, listening to his peaceful breathing, while my mind raced with plans and possibilities. In 1 week, I would walk into a room full of criminals who'd been targeting women like me for years. I would smile and network and gather intelligence while surrounded by men who viewed successful women as resources to be exploited rather than people to be respected. The risk was enormous. If the Phoenix Group discovered my connection to the FBI investigation, I had no idea how they might react. But the opportunity was even greater. For the first time since discovering David's betrayal, I had a chance to strike back directly to transform from victim to hunter to ensure that justice would be both comprehensive and devastating. I reached for my phone and sent a secure message to Madison Sophia and Agent Rodriguez. Portland meeting confirmed for next week. Operation Phoenix Down is go. The responses came back immediately. Madison: ready. Sophia: let's destroy them. Rodriguez: outstanding work. Federal backup will be in place. As I closed my eyes, I realized that the woman who'd discovered David's boarding pass to Cabo San Lucas had been fundamentally changed by the experience. She'd been naive, trusting, willing to believe the best about people she loved. The woman planning to infiltrate a criminal network next week was harder, smarter, more dangerous. David had created his own nemesis by betraying me. The Phoenix Group was about to discover that their greatest vulnerability wasn't law enforcement or financial oversight. It was the intelligence and determination of the women they'd underestimated for far too long. The grand ballroom of the Portland Hilton glittered with the kind of understated luxury that attracted successful people who preferred influence to ostentation. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over networking clusters of well-dressed professionals, while servers circulated with champagne and carefully crafted appetizers. To any observer, the Phoenix Group's West Coast Development Summit looked like exactly what it claimed to be: an exclusive gathering of investors and entrepreneurs discussing legitimate business opportunities. But I knew better. Standing near the registration table in my carefully chosen navy blue dress, I surveyed the room with the analytical eye of someone who'd spent 2 weeks preparing for this moment. Agent Rodriguez's team had briefed me extensively on the men I was likely to encounter, but seeing them in person was different. They moved through the crowd with practiced charm, each one performing the role of successful businessmen with the fluency of professional actors. David approached me with 2 glasses of champagne, his expression radiating the confidence of someone operating on his home territory. "Elena, you look incredible. Are you ready to meet some very important people?" "Absolutely," I replied, accepting the champagne while my modified jewelry recorded every word. "I've been looking forward to this all week." The truth was more complex. I'd been preparing for this evening with the intensity of someone studying for the most important exam of her life. Madison Torres, Sophia Chen, and I had spent countless hours researching every suspected Phoenix Group member, analyzing their social media presence, their reported business activities, their patterns of targeting victims. Madison was here tonight not as David's former girlfriend, but as a successful Portland marketing consultant attending a legitimate business networking event. Sophia had driven up from San Francisco ostensibly to explore partnership opportunities with Pacific Northwest development firms. Agent Rodriguez and her team were positioned throughout the hotel, ready to document whatever evidence we could gather. "Let me introduce you to Marcus Blackwood," David said, steering me toward a silver-haired man in an expensive suit who was holding court near the bar. "Marcus heads the Phoenix Group's California operations." Marcus Blackwood. The name appeared in Agent Rodriguez's files as a suspected leader of the criminal network, someone who'd been targeting women from Los Angeles to Sacramento for at least 3 years. Seeing him in person, I understood why he'd been successful. He possessed the kind of distinguished attractiveness that suggested wisdom and financial security. "Elena Nakamura," Blackwood said, extending his hand with a smile that felt both welcoming and predatory. "David has told me remarkable things about your company. Meridian Design's reputation precedes you." "Thank you." I understand the Phoenix Group is interested in UX consultation for hospitality projects. Among other things, we're always looking to partner with women entrepreneurs who understand the intersection of technology and luxury experience. Women entrepreneurs. The phrase carried undertones that made my skin crawl. Blackwood wasn't interested in my professional expertise. He was evaluating me as a potential victim, assessing my financial resources and personal vulnerabilities with the practiced eye of someone who'd made a career of exploitation. Elena specializes in creating digital experiences that feel both sophisticated and approachable. David said, his voice carrying genuine pride that would have been touching if it weren't completely calculated. Her work for Netflix's premium tier interface increased user engagement by 37%. The statistic was accurate. David had apparently researched my professional achievements extensively, probably to use them as credentials when targeting other victims. The psychological manipulation was breathtaking in its thoroughness. "Impressive," Blackwood said. "We're developing a chain of boutique hotels across the West Coast, properties that cater to successful women who travel frequently for business. The demographic research suggests enormous potential." Successful women who travel frequently for business. Exactly the type of women the Phoenix Group targeted for romance fraud. Blackwood was describing their victim selection criteria while pretending to discuss legitimate business opportunities. "That sounds fascinating," I said. "What specific markets are you targeting?" For the next 20 minutes, Blackwood outlined what sounded like a comprehensive business plan for luxury hotel development. The presentation was polished, detailed, supported by market research and financial projections that would have been convincing to someone who wasn't aware of his criminal background. But I caught the subtle inconsistencies. The development timelines that didn't account for regulatory approval processes, the financial structures that seemed designed to obscure rather than clarify funding sources, the targeting strategies that focused more on customer psychology than market demographics. "Elena," David said eventually, "Marcus would like to introduce you to some other members of the development team." I spent the next hour circulating through the ballroom meeting men whose names appeared in FBI case files as suspected romance fraud operators. Each introduction felt like shaking hands with someone who viewed me as prey, rather than a potential business partner. There was Jonathan Rivers, supposedly a real estate acquisition specialist who'd actually been targeting women in Seattle and Vancouver. Tyler Morrison, who claimed to handle investor relations, but had been identified as the primary operator behind a series of investment scams in Oregon and Northern California. Daniel Cross, the supposed hospitality consultant who'd been running fake vacation rental schemes across the Pacific Northwest. Each man was charming, professional, apparently successful. Each one showed interest in my business credentials while asking subtly intrusive questions about my financial situation, my personal life, my professional network. They were conducting reconnaissance disguised as business networking. "Elena," a familiar voice called from across the room. I turned to see Madison Torres approaching, her expression perfectly calibrated to suggest casual recognition rather than coordinated planning. "Madison, what a surprise to see you here." I hugged her with the enthusiasm of someone encountering an unexpected acquaintance at a professional event. David's expression flickered with something that might have been concern before settling back into practiced charm. "You two know each other." "We met at a women's entrepreneurship conference last year," Madison said smoothly. Elena's presentation on user experience design was brilliant. The lie was perfectly believable because it contained enough truth to pass casual scrutiny. There had been such a conference, I had given such a presentation, and Madison could have attended. The Phoenix Group's research into their victims was extensive, but apparently not comprehensive enough to identify all potential connections between their targets. "Small world," David said, his voice carefully neutral. "Isn't it?" I replied, watching his face for any sign that he suspected coordination between Madison and me. But David was too skilled a performer to reveal his concerns openly. He continued playing the role of successful businessman, introducing his wife to important contacts, while Madison and I acted out the script of professional women reconnecting at a networking event. Over the next 30 minutes, Madison began introducing me to other attendees, legitimate business people who were unknowingly providing cover for the Phoenix Group's criminal activities, hotel executives, investment advisors, development consultants who believed they were attending a genuine industry conference. The sophistication of the operation was remarkable. The Phoenix Group had constructed an entire fictional business ecosystem, complete with real companies, actual professionals, and legitimate industry connections. They weren't operating on the margins of the business world. They were hiding in plain sight among successful professionals who had no idea they were providing cover for systematic criminal activity. "Elena," Madison said quietly, when we found ourselves momentarily alone near the windows overlooking downtown Portland. "I think I've identified at least 6 Phoenix Group members in this room, and possibly twice that many legitimate attendees who have no idea what they're really supporting. Any sign of Sophia? She's over by the registration table, talking to someone who matches the description of the San Francisco operator, the one Agent Rodriguez suspected was targeting tech executives." I scanned the room until I spotted Sophia engaged in animated conversation with a man I didn't recognize. From a distance, their interaction looked like normal business networking. But knowing what I now knew about Phoenix Group tactics, I could see the subtle signs of predatory evaluation disguised as professional interest. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Agent Rodriguez. Outstanding intelligence gathering. Continue documenting connections. Arrests coordinated for tomorrow morning." Tomorrow morning. In less than 12 hours, federal agents would be arresting the men I was currently chatting with about fictional hotel development projects. The Phoenix Group's elaborate criminal enterprise would be dismantled by the evidence we'd gathered through weeks of careful investigation. But first, I needed to survive the rest of tonight's performance. "Elena." David appeared at my elbow with another glass of champagne. "Marcus would like to discuss some specific partnership possibilities. Are you free for a more detailed conversation?" This was the moment Agent Rodriguez had prepared me for. The Phoenix Group apparently felt confident enough to move beyond general networking toward specific targeting. They were ready to begin the process of recruiting me as their next victim. "Of course," I said, following David and Marcus Blackwood toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. Blackwood settled into a leather chair with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to controlling conversations. "Elena, I've been impressed by our discussion tonight. The Phoenix Group is always looking for strategic partnerships with established companies, particularly those owned by visionary women entrepreneurs." "I appreciate the interest. What kind of partnership did you have in mind?" "Our hotel development projects require significant upfront investment, but they offer exceptional returns for partners who get involved early. We're particularly interested in working with companies that can provide both financial investment and specialized expertise." Financial investment. There it was, the transition from networking to targeting, from business discussion to fraud setup. Blackwood was beginning the process of convincing me to invest money in fictional projects that would never generate returns. "What kind of financial investment are we talking about?" I asked, playing the role of interested entrepreneur while my recording devices documented every word. "Our current project requires $2 million in development capital. Partners who invest at that level receive a 25% stake in all Phoenix Group projects, plus priority access to future opportunities." $2 million. The amount was staggering, but it explained how the Phoenix Group had been able to operate so extensively. They weren't targeting victims for thousands of dollars. They were systematically stealing hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, from each woman they deceived. "That's a significant investment," I said carefully. "What kind of documentation would be involved?" David leaned forward with enthusiasm that seemed genuine. "The legal paperwork is straightforward. Partnership agreements, investment contracts, the standard documentation for development projects. Marcus handles all the regulatory compliance. Standard documentation that was probably completely fraudulent, designed to create the appearance of legitimate business investment while actually transferring money to accounts controlled by criminal operators. I'd need to review everything with my attorney and financial advisors," I said. "This isn't the kind of decision I'd make quickly." Of course, Blackwood said. Due diligence is essential for partnerships of this magnitude. Why don't we schedule a follow-up meeting where I can present the complete project portfolio? He pulled out an expensive leather portfolio and extracted what appeared to be a professional business proposal. Glossy photos of hotel properties, financial projections, market analysis, data, everything designed to create the impression of a legitimate investment opportunity. But I noticed the subtle flaws that Marcus Webb had trained me to recognize. The financial projections that relied on unrealistic market assumptions. The property photos that could have been taken from real estate websites. The market analysis that contained statistical anomalies suggesting fabricated data. This looks very thorough. I said, accepting the portfolio while knowing it was probably worthless fiction. We've found that detailed presentation materials help potential partners understand the scope of our operations, Blackwood said. The Phoenix Group has been developing properties across the West Coast for 5 years. Our track record speaks for itself. 5 years. The timeline matched exactly with Agent Rodriguez's investigation into organized romance fraud in the region. The Phoenix Group had been operating their criminal enterprise for half a decade, targeting successful women and stealing millions of dollars while hiding behind the facade of legitimate business development. Elena, David said, I think this partnership could be the breakthrough Meridian Design has been looking for. The opportunity to expand into hospitality consulting while generating significant investment returns. My husband was actively recruiting me as a victim of the criminal network he belonged to. He was willing to steal millions of dollars from his own wife to support an organization that had been systematically exploiting women across multiple states. The psychological implications were staggering. David wasn't just cheating on me or lying about his career. He was treating our marriage as a resource extraction opportunity, viewing me as a particularly valuable target rather than a person he loved. I'm definitely interested. I said the words tasting like poison, but necessary for maintaining my cover. When would you like to schedule our follow-up meeting? Next week would be ideal, Blackwood said. We're moving quickly on the current development cycle, so timing is important for potential partners. Next week would be too late for the Phoenix Group. By next week, Marcus Blackwood would be in federal custody, along with David and the rest of their criminal network. The hotel development projects would be revealed as elaborate fiction, and the investment opportunities would be exposed as systematic fraud. But Blackwood didn't know that. None of them knew that their victims had transformed into hunters, that their targeting methods had been turned against them, that months of careful investigation were about to culminate in their complete destruction. That works perfectly, I said. I'm excited about the possibilities. We exchanged contact information with Blackwood, providing business cards for companies that Agent Rodriguez had already identified as fraudulent fronts. The performance was so convincing that if I hadn't known better, I might have actually considered investing in their fictional projects. As the evening wound down, I found myself standing in the hotel lobby with David, Madison, and Sophia, 3 women who'd been targeted by the Phoenix Group, and 1 man who had no idea we'd spent months planning his downfall. What did you think of the presentations? David asked as we waited for our cars. Very impressive, I said. I can see why you're excited about the partnership opportunities. Madison and Sophia nodded agreement, both of them playing their roles perfectly. To any observer, we looked like successful professionals who'd enjoyed a productive networking event. But we were actually 3 women who'd just gathered the final evidence needed to destroy a criminal organization that had stolen millions of dollars from dozens of victims across the West Coast. Elena, David said as we drove back toward Seattle, I'm proud of how you handled yourself tonight. Blackwood was clearly impressed by your professionalism. Thank you. I think this could be a significant opportunity for both of us. For both of us. David was right in a way he couldn't have imagined. Tonight would indeed be significant for both of us, but not in the way he expected. The next morning began with Agent Rodriguez's phone call at 6:47 a.m. Elena, it's happening. We are executing arrest warrants for 12 Phoenix Group members simultaneously across 4 states. David Sterling, Marcus Blackwood, and 10 others are being taken into custody as we speak. I looked across our bed at David, who was still sleeping peacefully after his successful evening of recruiting his own wife as a criminal target. In 30 minutes, federal agents would be knocking on our door to arrest him for fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy charges that carried potential sentences of 20 years or more. "Are you ready for this?" Rodriguez asked. I thought about the past months of investigation, the discovery of David's systematic betrayal, the alliance I'd built with Madison and Sophia, the evidence we'd gathered to destroy an entire criminal network. "I'm more than ready," I said. "I'm looking forward to it." The doorbell rang at 7:23 a.m. David stirred beside me, probably expecting room service or a package delivery. Instead, he found 6 FBI agents with an arrest warrant that would end his criminal career forever. "David Sterling, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, and multiple counts of identity theft." I watched from our bedroom doorway as the man I'd been married to for 4 years was handcuffed and read his rights. His expression shifted from confusion to shock to the dawning realization that his carefully constructed world was collapsing completely. "Elena," he said, as the agents prepared to lead him away, "this is some kind of mistake. Call Patricia Chen. Call my attorney. This is all a misunderstanding." There was no misunderstanding. The Phoenix Group's systematic exploitation of successful women was ending exactly as it should, with justice prosecution and consequences proportional to the damage they'd inflicted. "Goodbye, David," I said, and meant it completely. 6 months later, I stood in a federal courthouse in Seattle, watching David Sterling receive a sentence of 18 years in federal prison. Marcus Blackwood got 22 years. The other Phoenix Group members received sentences ranging from 12 to 20 years, with requirements for full restitution to their victims. But the courtroom proceeding was just the formal conclusion of a transformation that had begun the night I discovered David's boarding pass to Cabo San Lucas. The woman who'd been devastated by her husband's betrayal had become someone who could orchestrate the destruction of an entire criminal network. Madison Torres. Sophia Chen and I had established the Phoenix Rising Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating women about romance fraud and supporting victims of financial exploitation. The foundation had already helped prevent dozens of potential targeting cases and provided resources for hundreds of women who'd experienced similar betrayals. The work was personally fulfilling in ways that business success had never been. Every woman we helped represented a victory against the predators who viewed successful women as resources to be exploited rather than people to be respected. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. "David's prison transfer is complete. He's now at the Federal Correctional Institution in Oregon, where he'll have approximately 17 years to contemplate his career choices." 17 years. Assuming good behavior and no additional charges from ongoing investigations into Phoenix Group activities in other states. David Sterling would be in his mid-50s when he was released. His criminal network destroyed his victims, protected by resources we'd built from the ashes of his betrayal. I looked out at Elliott Bay from my new office in Pioneer Square, the same neighborhood where I'd first met Marcus Webb, and begun planning my investigation into David's deception. The view reminded me daily that I'd survived something that could have destroyed me, and instead had used it to become someone stronger and more purposeful than I'd ever been before. My marriage to David had been based on lies, but my response to his betrayal had been built on truth, justice, and the determination to ensure that other women wouldn't experience what I'd endured. The Phoenix Group had targeted successful women because they assumed we would be too embarrassed or isolated to fight back effectively. They'd been wrong about that. Spectacularly, devastatingly wrong. The woman who'd discovered David's boarding pass had been naive and trusting. The woman who'd orchestrated his downfall was someone who understood that betrayal could be transformed into power, that victims could become hunters, and that justice served strategically was far more satisfying than revenge pursued emotionally. David Sterling had created his own nemesis by underestimating the intelligence and determination of the woman he'd married. The Phoenix Group had destroyed itself by targeting women who possessed the exact skills and resources needed to expose and eliminate their criminal enterprise. In trying to exploit us, they'd awakened something far more dangerous than they'd ever imagined. And that awakening had cost them everything they'd built through years of systematic deception and theft. The transformation was complete. The phoenix had risen from the ashes of betrayal, and she was more powerful than anyone who'd tried to destroy her had ever dreamed possible. Elena Nakamura's story reminds us that betrayal, while devastating, can become the catalyst for transformation we never knew we needed. Sometimes the people who try to destroy us end up revealing strengths we didn't know we possessed. When predators underestimate their victims, they often create their own downfall, because there's nothing more dangerous than an intelligent person who's been pushed too far and decides to push back strategically. The woman who discovered that boarding pass at 2:47 a.m. thought her world was ending, but she emerged as someone who could orchestrate the downfall of an entire criminal network. Elena transformed from a trusting wife into a strategic hunter, from an isolated victim into a leader who built alliances that protected countless other women from similar exploitation. Elena's journey teaches us that when life shatters our illusions, we have a choice. We can remain broken by what was taken from us, or we can use that knowledge to build something stronger, something that serves a purpose greater than ourselves. Trust once shattered can be rebuilt, but this time with wisdom boundaries and the kind of strategic thinking that turns survivors into protectors. The Phoenix Group thought they were targeting vulnerable women who would be too embarrassed or isolated to fight back effectively. They couldn't have been more wrong. Elena Madison and Sophia proved that successful women don't just recover from betrayal, they weaponize it. They transform their pain into power, their knowledge into protection for others, and their desire for justice into systematic change that prevents future victims. David Sterling received 18 years in federal prison to contemplate his choices. Marcus Blackwood got 22 years. The Phoenix Group's criminal enterprise was completely dismantled, their methods exposed, their victims supported and empowered. But perhaps the most satisfying justice of all was watching Elena rise from the ashes of their deception to become something they never anticipated, their complete and total undoing. Sometimes the phoenix that rises from the ashes burns brighter and flies higher than anything that came before. Elena Nakamura proved that betrayal isn't the end of the story, it's just the beginning of a much better chapter. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.